So the last piece that we need to talk about is how to complete the square and identify what type of conic section that we have. So we're going to be completing the square. All right. And once we complete the square, our job is to identify the conic. Basically, is this a parabola? Is it a circle? Do we have an ellipse? Or do we have a hyperbola? And so what this is going to require is for us to really have a good handle on identifying or matching up equations that we find with our standards. And so let's zoom this out a little bit. Give ourselves some more space here to complete the square. So let's start with an equation. This is going to be an x squared plus y squared minus 6x plus 4y plus 9 equals 0. And now with all of our equations that we're going to be working with, when we complete the square, we always need to gather all of the x's and the y's together. So I'm going to reorder my terms. And I'm going to put my x squared and my minus 6x together. And then again, because I'm going to complete the square, I'm going to say I'm going to need to add something to create a completing the square from here. And then I'm also going to put together my y's. So I have my y squared and my 4y. Oops. It's a y, not a g. And again, I'm going to need to add something to this to complete the square. And this constant is going to hang out and wait for us to do that work. Now the other thing is that because I'm going to be adding something to both of these, I'm going to need to give myself 2 more spaces so that way I can balance this completing the square. Because whatever I add here to complete the square on the x terms, I'm going to need to do its opposite here, and the same thing here. If I complete the square, I need to balance. So again, when we're completing the square, we're taking half of this term and squaring it. So I'm going to be adding 9, which means to balance this part of the equation, I'm going to need to subtract 9. And then here, when I take half of this term and square it, I'm going to be adding 4 to complete the square, which means I need to subtract 4 to balance it. Now, I'm going to complete the square. And so I'm going to end up with an x. Because this sign is a negative, it's going to be minus 3 squared plus y, and again this is a positive, plus 2 quantity squared. And then this plus 9 minus 9 are going to cancel out, and I get minus 4 equals 0. Now this is almost in the format that I need. If you think about the equations that we are working with, parabolas do not have a y squared and an x squared. Right? Either only the y squared or only the x squared. And so this is either a circle, ellipse, or a hyperbola. And I have no denominators in here. I only have this constant. And if I move that constant to the other side, this creates a radius, and this is a circle. So this follows the pattern of x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And this would be my equation. So let's look at a couple others. Let's see. How about x squared plus 4y squared minus 6x plus 16y plus 21 equals 0. Now again, if that's the equation that I have, I'm going to need to combine or contain all of my x terms together. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my y terms. Now with my y terms, however, there is a coefficient on my y squared. So because I want to make sure that there's a 1 in front of my squared term, I first need to factor out the 4 from these two terms to be able to write this as y squared plus 4y. So just notice that all I did was factor out the 4 from the two that I underlined that both have a y attached to them. And I'm still going to need to add something to complete the square. And then I have my plus 21. And again, 2 more blanks to be able to balance my equation. So again, I'm going to cut this term in half. And now this first part is the same as last time. There is no coefficient in front of my parabola or my parentheses. So the value that I just added here was 9, so I'm going to counter that or balance it. But now on here, when I take half of this term and square it, I'm really not adding the value of 4. Remember that I had factored out a 4 earlier, so I really have the value of 4 times 4, which is 16. So I need to balance that with a minus 16. All right. So again, just like we did before when we complete the square, you have to think about the value you added, not just the number you wrote. And so now when we complete the square, x minus 3 quantity squared plus 4 times y plus 2 quantity squared. And I have to think about what this looks like, and you can always use a calculator. All right, so 21 minus 9 minus 16 is a minus 4. Okay. And so what's going to happen is that when I move that constant to the other side now, okay. Now, even though it looks like this should be a circle again, it's not. When you have any type of circle, ellipse, or hyperbola, you are not allowed to have a coefficient out here. And so if I divide by this 4, what's going to happen is I have to divide everything by 4. So if I want to get rid of that coefficient, I need to divide every single piece by that coefficient so that it cancels out. And so what I have here now is I have an equation where I have values in the denominator, and they're separated by a plus sign. Now this is either going to be an ellipse or a hyperbola. Ellipses are always a plus sign. Hyperbolas are always a negative sign, separating the two terms. So this is going to be an ellipse.